Hi, I'm Marilee. Last winter, my fever hit 102 while I was sleeping in the back seat of my car, behind a laundromat. My father knew I was homeless. My stepmother made sure of it. They said I chose to leave. But they forgot the part where they emptied my bank account, rewrote my mother's will, and made sure no one would rent to me. Even the Christmas photo didn't include me. They wanted a perfect family image, and I didn't fit. But when my grandfather found me half frozen, everything changed. What happens when the daughter they erased decides to fight back? Quietly? Strategically? Do people like that ever get what they deserve? And does someone like me ever really get to come home? It started like most nights had since I picked up the closing shift at the bakery. My boots were soaked through, the snow hadn't let up for hours, and my fingers ached from handling cold change all evening. Rochester winters have a way of reminding you just how replaceable you are, at work, in life, and apparently, in your own home. I turned the corner onto our street, dragging my feet and hoping Valora had left the porch light on. I wasn't expecting a welcome party, but something warm to come back to. Maybe the smell of pasta or the sound of the TV murmuring reruns. Instead, the house looked different, not darker, just finished, like a chapter already closed. When I pushed the front door open, the first thing I noticed was my suitcase, wedged upright like a waiting cab passenger just inside the hallway. My name tag from work was still clipped to the zipper. That's when I saw her, Valora. She sat at the kitchen island with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. No coat, no shoes, like she hadn't been outside all day. "You're home late," she said, not looking up. I glanced at my bag. "What's this?" She finally met my eyes, her expression unreadable, but far from surprised. "You're 18, Marilee. We've talked about you taking more responsibility. It's time you start living your own life." I blinked. "Wait, are you saying I have to move out? Now?" She sipped her wine, cool and unbothered. "You've had time. We've supported you through high school, given you a roof, food, even kept you on Derek's insurance longer than we had to. That's more than some parents would do. This isn't about the house, is it? It's about the money. Mom's money." That got a flinch. Just barely. I saw the letters from the lawyer. She left something for me, didn't she? Valora's voice stayed calm. "You're making this emotional when it doesn't need to be. You'll land on your feet. People your age bounce back faster than you think." I stood frozen. The hallway, the warmth of the lights, the neatly folded laundry on the table, it all felt like a set. And I wasn't part of the cast anymore. Just then, Derek came in through the garage. Still in his blazer, loosened tie, face flushed from the cold. He took one look at me, then at the suitcase. "We've talked about this," he said, like it was just another business memo. "It's best for everyone." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing made it past the lump in my throat. I wasn't kicked out because I failed them. I was kicked out because I was inconvenient. I left the house with a single duffel, my coat, and my mother's old watch tucked in my pocket. Snowflakes had started to cling to my scarf by the time I made it 2 blocks down. I stopped at an ATM near the gas station. I didn't have much, but there had to be something left in the shared account Mom had opened for me. Transaction denied. Card declined. I checked my phone. No new messages. I texted my dad. "Can you check the account?" "I think there's a mistake." He saw it. 2 check marks, and his little gray icon flickered on, then off. I called. He answered. "Your mother's accounts were consolidated for estate processing," he said, like he was explaining a billing cycle. "That money belongs to the household now. I have a wife and daughter to take care of." "You mean Valora and Zinnia?" Silence. "You're still my father." "I can't help you anymore, Marilee. You need to grow up." He hung up. I didn't even realize I was walking until I looked up and saw the flickering neon sign of the old laundromat near the highway. My car was still there, a dusty 2003 Subaru Outback that Mom used to call her second baby. I crawled into the back, curled up inside the sleeping bag I kept for camping trips we never took, and stared at the roof of the car. That was home now. Me, a bag of stale granola bars, and the echo of a woman who once told me I was enough. I remember Valora at the funeral. She wore white, which was weird enough. She hugged too many people too hard, cried just loud enough to be heard but not questioned. Afterward, she told me, "You'll be okay. You're stronger than you look," as if strength was an inheritance. But I didn't inherit my mother's strength. I earned it. I unzipped the pouch where I kept her picture. She looked younger in that photo, wearing overalls, hair up, laughing at something off camera. The kind of laugh that made other people smile without knowing why. Her voice came back to me, soft and sure. "Don't let them take your voice, baby. Not even if they do it gently." I used to think she meant bullies or boys or the world, but maybe she meant family too. I watched the snowfall outside the window, settling into the silence like it belonged more than I did. My fingers had stopped shaking. The numbness was setting in, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the emptiness, the kind that doesn't scream. It just lingers. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't even feel angry, just removed, like a chapter already skipped ahead and forgot to include me. It wasn't the cold that scared me. It was how normal being discarded started to feel. I opened my eyes to a blur of frost trailing down the inside of the windshield. The silence in the car was thick, heavier than the wool blanket tangled around my legs. I didn't know how long I'd been asleep, but the air had gone still. Too still. I reached out and twisted the dial on the car's heater, hoping it would sputter back to life. Nothing. Just a hollow click, followed by more silence. The cold had won. I didn't panic. Not yet. Instead, I sat up slowly, groaning as my muscles protested. My head throbbed, a dull pressure behind my eyes. The ache in my joints had worsened overnight, and I knew what that meant. Fever. I wiped the condensation off the window with my sleeve. The parking lot outside the laundromat was still empty, blanketed in undisturbed snow. No one knew I was here. No one had asked. The same routine played out every morning now. I climbed out of the car, my boots crunching against the ice as I made my way around to the laundromat's back entrance. The owner didn't mind me using the restroom. He barely looked up when I walked in each day, just nodded once, the way you acknowledge stray dogs that keep returning but don't cause trouble. In the bathroom, I turned on the tap and let the cold water run over my wrists. I washed my face, careful not to look in the mirror. I'd seen enough. Chapped lips, red-rimmed eyes, hair shoved into a beanie that had started to smell like damp wool. I changed into my bakery uniform in the stall, pulling on a long-sleeve shirt beneath the polo to fight the chill. I could still hear my manager's voice from last week. "Try to look a little more approachable, Marilee. You've got the 'don't talk to me' face." By 8, I was behind the counter at Murphy's Bakes, smiling at strangers and slicing bagels. The heat from the ovens was a blessing and a curse. It made me feel almost human again, but stepping outside afterward felt like a slap across the face. Around noon, my shift leader handed me a leftover croissant and said, "Here, you look like you need it more than the trash does." I didn't say thank you, I just nodded. Back in the car that night, I tore the pastry into pieces and ate it in silence. The heat still hadn't come back. I rubbed my hands together, wishing I hadn't lost the second pair of gloves Mom bought me last winter. Afterward, I pulled my beanie over my ears and curled up in the back seat again, holding the photo of Mom tucked inside my coat. Days passed like that, each one indistinguishable from the last. Wake, work, pretend, sleep, repeat. By the end of the second week, the fever hit harder. I started sweating in my sleep and woke up shaking so badly that I had to sit in the laundromat bathroom for 20 minutes just to feel steady again. I knew I should have gone to a clinic, but I didn't have insurance, or an address, or anyone to write down under emergency contact. At work, I nearly dropped an entire tray of coffee cups when my hands gave out. A girl on my shift, Morgan, caught them just in time. "Jesus, Marilee," she said. "You okay?" I smiled the way I'd taught myself. Lips up, teeth showing, but no emotion behind it. "Yeah, just tired. Finals, you know?" She didn't push. No one ever did. That was the perk of being invisible. Later that night, I sat in the car and watched the snow fall in waves. I turned on my phone to distract myself from the throbbing in my head and opened Instagram without thinking. The first post on my feed was from Zinnia. She stood in the center of the frame, wrapped in a pale blue graduation gown, surrounded by flowers. Valora and Derek flanked her, both dressed in coordinated outfits, smiling like a toothpaste commercial. The caption read, "Grateful for my forever people, #blessed, #family first." I stared at it for a long time. There were 5 photos in the carousel. Not one of them included me. I wasn't just missing from the picture, I had been erased, deleted, like I'd never existed, and judging by the comments, such a beautiful family. So proud of you, Zinnia. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. The tears came fast, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet, familiar. I thought back to every family event where I was the one holding the camera. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. They never asked me to be in the photo. At the time, I told myself I didn't mind, that I wasn't photogenic anyway. But the truth was, they didn't forget to include me. They chose not to. I remembered the Christmas card the year after Mom died. It arrived in the mail while I was still living at home. The envelope was addressed to the Wells family. Inside, a photo of Derek, Valora, and Zinnia in matching sweaters. The words printed in gold across the front. Joy, peace, and love from our family to yours. My name wasn't anywhere on it. Now, even digitally, they had erased me again. My fingers trembled as I set the phone aside. I wrapped myself tighter in the blanket, drawing it up to my chin. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts. The car was colder than usual. I checked the dashboard. 14 degrees. I leaned forward and turned the key in the ignition, hoping the heater would hum back to life. It didn't. Just a soft click. And then silence. I stayed that way for a while, still, listening to the wind press against the car windows, the creak of the frame shifting in the cold. My body ached. My skin burned and froze all at once. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but I didn't even know who would pick up. My aunt in Wisconsin hadn't spoken to me since the funeral. Morgan didn't even have my number. Derek had blocked me, so I did what I always did. I said nothing. I pulled the blanket tighter and laid back down, curling into myself. If I don't wake up, would anyone ask why? Somewhere between sleep and slipping away, I heard knocking. Not the kind that startled you, but steady, deliberate. It pulled me out of whatever feverish state I was in, just enough to realize the cold hadn't killed me yet. The frost on the windows had thickened overnight, turning the windshield into a sheet of white. My breath, shallow and wheezing, fogged a tiny patch near the passenger side. The knocking came again, louder this time. A flashlight beam cut through the blur, followed by the shape of a man's coat, thick, corduroy maybe, and a gloved hand tapping against the glass. I tensed. I hadn't told anyone where I was. Nobody knew I parked behind the laundromat every night. My heart raced, but my body was too weak to react. Then the voice came, rough, unmistakable. Marilee? My name. Is that you, sweetheart? I blinked hard, pressing my forehead to the window. The shape leaned in closer, light now cast on his face. Older, tired. Familiar in a way I hadn't felt in months. Grandpa? I whispered, not trusting my throat to do more. He fumbled with the handle and opened the door, letting in a burst of frozen air. His face was flushed from the cold, glasses fogged at the corners, and his voice cracked with disbelief. My God, what the hell are you doing out here? I tried to speak, but the words dissolved. I felt his arms reach around me, steady but careful, like I might shatter. My knees gave out as soon as I shifted, and everything went black. When I came to, I was in a bed. Not a cot, not a car seat, but a real bed, soft and sunken, just enough to hold me like it meant to. I blinked against the low light, the warmth wrapping around me like a memory. Something soft rested on my forehead, a wet cloth. My throat burned, but I could breathe. I turned my head and saw him, Grandpa Eldon, sitting in an old recliner beside the bed, a paperback resting face down on his lap. His posture was stiff, like he hadn't dared to move since I passed out. He noticed I was awake but didn't rush to speak. Instead, he poured water from a ceramic pitcher and held it out. Small sips, he said gently. I obeyed, the water hitting my stomach like a rock and a balm at once. When I finished, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I didn't know, he said. I didn't answer, didn't need to. We both understood what that sentence carried. Valora said you were traveling, he added, that you got a scholarship and didn't want to come back. Of course she did. I didn't even flinch. He rubbed his temples, frustrated with himself more than me. I should have asked more questions. I cleared my throat. You're here now. He looked up at me then, eyes watery, jaw set like he was holding back 1,000 apologies he couldn't bear to say out loud. The rest of that day passed slowly. He fed me soup, homemade chicken, the kind I used to refuse because it didn't come from a can. I slept more than I stayed awake, surrounded by flannel sheets and the faint scent of cedar. The house felt lived in, but quiet, like it had been waiting for someone to come back. Later that night, once I'd eaten enough to sit up without getting dizzy, he led me down the hallway to a small bedroom. The walls were painted light blue, the kind that dulled into gray when the lights dimmed. Books lined the shelves, some old science magazines, a stack of dog-eared classics. A vintage lamp glowed beside the bed. This used to be your mom's room, he said. I turned slowly, scanning every detail. It didn't feel like a shrine, but nothing had been erased either. Her handwriting was still on a dry erase board by the desk, formulas I didn't understand, and doodles of planets. A ribbon hung on the wall. Regional Science Fair, first place. On the dresser sat a wooden box with my name etched across the lid. To Marilee. Sweet 16. Love, Mom. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 things. A silver necklace with a charm shaped like a crescent moon, a folded birthday card with faded ink, and a tiny leather-bound journal with cracked corners. I sat on the bed and opened the card first. Happy birthday, my girl. If I'm not there to give this to you, I want you to remember 2 things. You're braver than you believe, and the world is lucky to have your voice in it. Don't let anyone rewrite who you are. Love always, Mom. The necklace felt warm in my palm, even though it had been untouched for years. I slipped it over my head, the weight of it settling just above my heart. Later that night, when the house was silent again and I couldn't sleep, I opened the journal. Each page was covered in her handwriting, loopy, neat, exact. She'd started writing it the day she got her diagnosis. Her entries weren't dramatic, just honest. She wrote about chemo, about me, about her fear that Derek would remarry too quickly, about how much she hoped I'd find my way even if she couldn't show me how. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before she passed. I don't trust what Derek will do once I'm gone, but I trust that Marilee will know who she is, even when no one else remembers. I closed the journal slowly, holding it against my chest. Tears came, but not the kind that shattered. These were warm, full of something deeper than sadness, something like clarity. In the morning, Grandpa was already in the kitchen when I came out. He'd made scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, but it smelled like home. He poured coffee into a chipped mug and slid it toward me across the table. You look better, he said. I feel better. He nodded, then folded his hands like he was weighing a question. Marilee, he said slowly, do you want to find out why they really threw you away? I stared at Grandpa, unsure if I heard him right. The kitchen light above flickered slightly, casting his face into a mix of soft warmth and shadow. His tone wasn't accusatory, it was quiet, calm, deadly certain. Do you want to find out why they really threw you away? He asked again, this time leaning back in his chair like he already knew I'd say yes. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, steady and clear. I do. The next morning we ate breakfast in silence, the kind of silence that says something big is coming. He buttered toast while I sipped weak coffee, my appetite still somewhere between recovery and dread. After we cleared the table, he disappeared into the hall closet, returning with a keychain I didn't recognize. Attic key, he explained. Your mom used to call it the room where the ghosts live. He led me up the creaking stairs. The attic door stuck slightly at the top, but with a firm push, it groaned open, releasing a gust of cool, dry air that smelled like cedar and thyme. Boxes were stacked neatly in rows, labeled in Grandpa's blocky handwriting. Taxes, May 2008, car titles, and then one that stopped me in my tracks. Cassandra, personal docs. I knelt in front of it, heart pounding. Inside were binders, envelopes, and a small lockbox. Grandpa opened the box and pulled out a thick folder, yellowed slightly at the edges. On the front, Last Will and Testament, Cassandra M. Wells. I never read this, he said quietly. Your father said there was a joint will filed with their attorney, said he'd take care of the paperwork. I opened the folder. The document inside was notarized, dated, and signed by my mother and a local notary public, 5 months before her death. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I scanned the lines, each word like a small betrayal made right. To my daughter, Marilee Cassandra Wells, I leave my controlling interest, 51%, of Brightwash laundromats, as well as the trust fund designated for her education and health care, to be released in full upon her 21st birthday, or earlier under the guidance of her appointed legal guardian. I looked at Grandpa. His face had gone pale. She wanted you to have control, he murmured. She didn't trust your father. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was confirmation. Everything I suspected. Everything I feared. She knew, I whispered. She saw it coming. Grandpa nodded slowly, jaw tightening. And so did he. We spent the rest of the day sorting through the papers, tax filings, business correspondence, bank statements. Everything was neatly cataloged. Everything told the same story. Mom planned carefully. She made sure I would be okay, if her instructions were followed. But they weren't. By late afternoon, I sat on the living room couch, legs curled under me, Mom's will open in my lap. I reached for my old phone. It was barely charged, but I remembered an email account I hadn't checked in forever. The one Mom helped me set up when I was 12. I signed in. Thousands of unread emails, mostly junk, but one stood out immediately. From Loyal 147. Subject: I kept everything. When you're ready, I'll tell you the truth. I clicked it open. It was dated 4 months ago. Marilee, if you're reading this, I want you to know your mom trusted me. I was her personal accountant for years, and I warned her what might happen. After her death, Derek filed a version of the will that didn't match the original. His version named Valora as co-executor and transferred business rights to himself. I couldn't stop it, but I didn't destroy the original. I kept it. Attached is the scanned version you should have seen, along with a photo of me and your mother. If you want the original back, I'll meet you. Just say the word. CL. Loyal 147. I opened the attachment. The will scanned in the file matched the physical copy we found, line for line, then the photo. My mom standing beside a gray-haired woman in a red cardigan, both smiling. She wrote my secret weapon in pen across the bottom. I showed Grandpa. That's Connie Lang, he said. She's one of the best. If she's offering help, you take it. That night, I didn't sleep much. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, the journal from my mom resting on my chest. I flipped through it again, finding comfort in her voice, her words. She had always been a planner, someone who left nothing to chance, and yet she couldn't stop what came after she was gone. But I could. In the morning, I didn't cry. I didn't call Derek. I didn't beg for my place back. I sat down across from Grandpa at the kitchen table and looked him in the eye. We don't ask them for permission, I said. We prove they stole what wasn't theirs. He nodded once. That's my girl. I spent the next few hours writing a reply to Connie. Short, precise. I'm ready. Tell me when and where. I didn't sign it with fear. I signed it with certainty. That evening, Grandpa poured me another cup of tea and asked, "Where do we start?" I didn't hesitate. I'm not starting with my father. I'm starting with the notary who signed that lie. Grandpa didn't press for details. After I told him I was starting with the notary, he simply nodded, pushed his chair back, and began clearing the breakfast plates. That's how it worked between us. We didn't waste energy on the obvious. He knew I needed a plan. I knew he'd back me up. Over the next few days, I focused on re-establishing a life outside the wreckage. My body was recovering, but my instincts had changed. I no longer craved comfort. I wanted control. I found a listing for a small apartment above a used bookstore near downtown. Old building, second floor, tiny kitchen, but it had heat and a lock. The landlord, Mr. Havens, was kind enough. We met in his office, which smelled like old leather and pipe tobacco. He offered me hot tea while I filled out the paperwork. "You'll need a co-signer if you don't have a stable income yet," he said, looking over the form. "Family, maybe?" "I have a grandfather," I replied. "He's retired, but he's willing." Havens nodded. "That'll do." We agreed I'd call back with the final bank information once we got things processed. Grandpa even offered to write a check for the first month. I thought, for the first time in a while, maybe things were turning. The next afternoon, Havens called back. His tone had changed. "I hate to say this, Miss Wells," he began, clearing his throat, "but your father called." I sat up straighter. "What?" "He said you've been in and out of some unstable situations. He didn't elaborate, but he suggested I reconsider the lease. Said there might be liability concerns." The room spun. I felt like I'd been punched, not hard, just slow and deep, right in the stomach. "And?" I asked, voice even. He paused. "I'm sorry. I can't move forward." After we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just stared at the phone, letting the silence fill the space where my rage was trying to escape. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were actively closing every door I tried to open. I drove to the laundromat where I'd once slept behind the dryers and parked in the same spot I used to hide. The snow had melted now, but the shadow of that cold still lived in me. I sat there, engine idling, and called Derek. He answered on the third ring. "Hello?" "You called the landlord," I said flatly. A pause. Then, "I was protecting you from a bad decision." "No," I said. "You were protecting yourself from having to admit I still exist." He let out a short laugh. "Valora said you'd try to play victim. You always had a flair for the dramatic." I didn't flinch. "If you interfere again," I said, every syllable calm and clipped, "I will take everything you've hidden. And I won't do it quietly." Another pause, then a scoff. "Whatever you think you're doing, it won't stick. No one's going to take the word of a bitter kid trying to undo her father's hard work." He hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone, and instead of feeling helpless, I felt the floor beneath me solidify. I'd been tiptoeing too long. They thought they'd broken me when they pushed me out. They didn't realize I'd been rebuilding, brick by brick, underneath their feet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake scrolling through my phone, idly checking the few social media accounts I hadn't deleted. Then I saw it. Zinnia had gone live. She was in the kitchen, holding her phone at an upward angle, all soft filters and lip gloss. Valora was in the background, her voice floating in like a casual breeze. "She was always too sensitive," Valora said. "Being gone is the best thing to happen to this family." Zinnia laughed. "Ungrateful, honestly." "You gave her so much." I watched it 3 times, not out of disbelief, those days were over, but out of study. It wasn't just what they said, it was how casual it was, like I was a stain they'd finally scrubbed out. They weren't just rewriting the story, they were polishing it for an audience. Still, I didn't post back. I didn't comment. I didn't text Zinnia and remind her of the time I stayed up all night helping her with geometry, or when I covered for her when she snuck out with that senior. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Title: For the Lawyer. Inside, I dropped everything. The will, the scanned copy from Connie, the emails, the notarized original Grandpa and I had found. I included a transcript of the live video, complete with timestamps. I didn't need revenge, I needed proof. The next morning, I called the law office listed on one of Mom's old files, someone named Judith Moore. She'd been a friend once, a colleague maybe, I wasn't sure. But her name came up more than once in the journal. I sat in the waiting room of her downtown office, hands cold despite the heating vent at my feet. Judith emerged, wearing dark-rimmed glasses and a tailored blazer that gave away nothing about her mood. She extended a hand. "You're Cassandra's daughter," she said, more statement than question. I nodded. We walked into her office, and I laid out the folder in silence. She read everything carefully, her expression unreadable until the very end. When she looked up, her eyes met mine with a mix of weight and calculation. "How far are you willing to go, Marilee?" I didn't blink. Far enough to make them remember I existed. I left Judith's office just after lunch. The sky hung low with the kind of gray that made the street lamps flicker on too early. I walked slowly to Grandpa's truck, letting the cold sting my cheeks while my brain cataloged everything she'd said. Fraud. Intent to conceal. Civil litigation. I didn't understand every term, but I understood this. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What happened to me had a name, and names could be fought in court. By the time we got home, the sun had dipped past the trees, casting long shadows across the porch. Grandpa parked and cut the engine. We sat in silence for a minute, the heat clicking off. Then he looked over at me. "You sure you're ready for this?" I nodded. "I've been ready. I just didn't know what to do with the fire until now." He nodded back, then pushed his door open without another word. That night, we ate chili in the living room, bowls balanced on TV trays like we were watching a game instead of prepping for war. I'd just finished drying the dishes when someone knocked on the door. I glanced at Grandpa. He raised a brow. "No one just shows up here," he muttered. He opened the door cautiously. Standing on the porch, wrapped in a faded navy coat and holding a scuffed tote bag, was someone I hadn't seen in almost 5 years. Martha. She looked older than I remembered, shorter too, like time had pushed her downward. But her eyes were the same, sharp, kind, nervous. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," she said quickly. "But I saw the post." Grandpa stepped aside, letting her in without a word. I hadn't posted anything public, but I had sent a quiet ripple. A private message to a handful of people I knew had once worked for my mother. Some responded with vague apologies, others with silence. But not her. She stepped inside, pulling off her gloves. "I shouldn't have waited this long," she said. "But I was afraid." Derek and Valora. They made it very clear what was mine to know and what wasn't. I led her into the kitchen, where she sat down at the table and opened her tote bag. Inside was an old cell phone, one of those flip models you only saw now in thrift stores and crime documentaries. "I recorded something," she said, fingers trembling as she set it on the table. "Back when I still worked at the house. They didn't know. I couldn't believe what I heard, and I needed to have it in case something ever happened." Grandpa folded his arms and leaned against the fridge. I stayed silent. She hit play. The audio was scratchy but clear enough. Derek's voice came first. "We can't wait much longer. She's turning 18. If we don't move soon, the trust will activate." Valora responded, her voice clipped and matter-of-fact. "Then get her out, before her birthday. We rewrite the will, file the update, and cut her off clean. If she inherits anything, it's over for us." I stared at the little phone as if it might start glowing. Martha looked at me, eyes wide with guilt. I knew it wasn't right, but I needed the job. I had medical bills. My son was— "It's okay," I said quietly. "You didn't owe me anything, but I'm glad you came." She exhaled a breath she'd probably been holding for years. "I'll testify. If it comes to that, you deserve what was yours." I copied the file to a USB and labeled it, "Recording Proof." After Martha left, Grandpa stood by the window, arms crossed. "That was our opening move," I said. He turned and nodded. "One they'll never see coming." That night, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and drafted a simple email to Judith. Subject, Phase 1. Attachment, Recording Proof, MP3. Body, I've got a witness, ready to proceed. I hit send and sat back in the chair, staring at the ceiling fan. There was no rush of satisfaction, no dramatic swell of emotion. Just clarity, clean and cold. The next morning, Grandpa slid a plain envelope across the table during breakfast. "What's this?" He tapped the corner. "Something old school. Thought it might get their attention better than an email." Inside was a burned copy of the recording. On the label, he'd written the date and nothing else. On the card tucked inside was a single sentence, written in blue ink with deliberate strokes. "The story you buried is about to resurface." He didn't say who he planned to send it to, and I didn't ask. The envelope was delivered that morning. Valora probably opened it while standing at her kitchen island, cradling her favorite mug, thinking she had the day figured out. She likely didn't expect the CD inside, or the words written in blue ink on the card, "The story you buried is about to resurface." Later that afternoon, the mailman left a second envelope at Grandpa's house. This one was from Valora. It was cream-colored, textured, thick enough to feel expensive and meaningless. Inside was a handwritten card with gold foil edges and neat cursive that smelled faintly like perfume. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still that fake, sweet curvature she used when writing Christmas notes and public thank yous. "Zinnia's senior showcase is this weekend," it began. "We would love for you to be part of the family again. Let's put the past behind us. Wear something elegant. We've missed you." Tucked inside the card was a photo. Valora, Derek, and Zinnia, all dressed in white, sitting on a cream-colored sofa in what looked like a staged living room ad. Everyone smiled, polished, lit just right. Zinnia's dress shimmered like it cost more than I'd made in 6 months. I held the photo between 2 fingers like it might burn me. "She doesn't want peace," I said, walking into the kitchen where Grandpa was drying dishes. "She wants a final act." He didn't look up. "That isn't an olive branch. It's bait." I folded the card slowly and slid it back into the envelope. "I know. That's why I'm wearing armor, not heels." The night of the showcase, I dressed deliberately. Simple black dress, no jewelry except the necklace my mother left me. I pinned my hair back, bare-faced except for mascara. I didn't want to look like I was trying. I wanted to look like I knew something they didn't. Grandpa dropped me off 2 blocks from the event, just as we'd planned. Judith would arrive separately. I didn't need backup, I just needed witnesses. The event was held at a hotel ballroom on the east side. Chandeliers, soft piano music, tiny desserts on platters. I walked in and felt eyes immediately. Zinnia was by the stage, already mid-performance, reciting a monologue that sounded vaguely rehearsed and deeply self-important. I stayed near the back, hands folded, expression calm. When the program ended, a wave of polite applause rolled through the crowd. Zinnia bowed. Valora stepped forward to greet guests like she was hosting a fundraiser. Then she spotted me. "Oh my goodness, look who's here!" she sang out, crossing the room like a socialite spotting a donor. "So glad she could join us. See, love always wins." I smiled thinly. She leaned in and air-kissed both sides of my face. "Cameras," she whispered in my ear. "Smile like we mean it." Derek appeared beside her. His hug was brief, stiff, his hand barely touching my back. He smelled like expensive cologne and guilt. Zinnia hovered nearby, adjusting her dress and avoiding my eyes. A photographer passed. Valora placed a hand on my shoulder and turned me slightly, tilting her head just enough to fake closeness. I let it happen. Every move she made was calculated, layered with practiced affection. She wasn't trying to welcome me back. She was trying to erase what I'd done with a single photo op. I waited until the crowd dispersed into smaller clusters. Judith was already here, seated quietly by the bar with a glass of water, her phone in her lap. We exchanged a nod. Then I followed Valora into the hallway, where she stood adjusting her lipstick in a pocket mirror. "You won't destroy what I built," she said, still watching her own reflection. "Not with a recording, not with some sad little folder of dusty paperwork. I've curated this family for years." I stepped beside her, keeping my voice low. "I'm not here to destroy anything," I said. "I'm here to correct the credits. You took the spotlight, you got the applause. I just want the audience to know who wrote the script." She snapped the mirror shut. "You're a child playing dress-up in a courtroom. And you're a woman rewriting history in broad daylight." We stood like that for a moment. mirror images of old wounds. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, a single text from a number she didn't recognize. Ready. Her fingers tightened around the phone. For the first time, her confidence flickered. "What did you do?" she asked, voice flatter now. "I didn't do anything," I said, turning away. "I just stopped staying quiet." The rest of the evening passed like an opera winding down before the curtain. Judith moved through the crowd quietly, greeting a few people, casually chatting with two members of the board that funded one of Valora's social causes. No announcements, no scenes, just presence. I left just after dessert trays were cleared. Grandpa waited outside, engine running, NPR humming low on the radio. "How was it?" he asked. "Performative." He nodded, turning the wheel as we pulled away from the lights. "They saw you, though," he said after a moment. "I looked out the window. That's the point. I let them watch." Back at the house, I poured myself a glass of water, checked my email, and crawled into bed. A message from Judith was waiting. Subject: tomorrow's timing. Body: be ready by 10 a.m. Wear something confident. The curtain falls at noon. Judith's text had been brief. Just one word, but it rang louder than anything Valora had ever screamed. Ready. That morning, I woke before the alarm. I'd barely slept anyway. I sat by the window, watching the frost on the pane slowly melt under the rising sun. I wasn't nervous. Not exactly. It felt more like standing in the eye of a storm that had been building for years. And finally, the wind was shifting. Judith picked me up at 10 sharp, just like she said. No small talk, just a nod and a quiet, "You sure?" before pulling away from the curb. "I've never been more sure of anything," I told her. The drive to the venue took 15 minutes. Just long enough for my heartbeat to catch a steady rhythm, for my palms to stop sweating, for the nerves to settle into something firmer, resolve. The showcase was being held at the same hotel that Valora loved to name-drop in her social media posts. The kind of place with marble floors, flower arrangements that cost more than my old car, and servers who smiled only when required. As soon as we stepped inside, I felt it. The shift. Eyes turned. Whispers traveled across the room like static. Judith peeled off to her seat among the board members, blending in seamlessly. I walked alone toward the rows of chairs. Valora spotted me from across the room. She was already at the mic, mid-speech, dressed in soft beige with pearls around her neck and a smile as polished as her nails. "And what makes a family isn't just blood, it's love, resilience, and forgiveness," she said, voice silky. Her gaze flicked toward me as if by accident. She didn't miss a beat. "We've faced challenges," she continued, "but we've chosen grace. We've chosen to heal." People nodded. The screen behind her flickered to life. A slideshow began to play. Photos of Zinnia in ballet recitals, Derek and Valora at charity galas, the three of them on ski trips, vacations, fundraisers. Not one photo of me, not one mention of my mother. It wasn't a family history, it was a revision. I took a seat near the back. Eldon was already there, dressed in his best flannel and khakis. His hand briefly touched my shoulder. No words, just presence. The slideshow continued until it didn't. The lights flickered. For a moment, I thought it was technical error. But then the next image came up, and it wasn't Zinnia in a prom dress. It was a black screen with bold white text. Correction. The real story. A gasp rose from the audience. The screen shifted again. Audio played. Derek's voice. "We can't wait much longer. She's turning 18. If we don't move soon, the trust will activate." Valora's voice followed, sharp and deliberate. "Then get her out, before her birthday. We rewrite the will, file the update, and cut her off clean. If she inherits anything, it's over for us." The screen split into scanned documents. The forged will Derek submitted, alongside the original my mother signed. My voice followed next. "This is the story they tried to bury. I'm Marilee. I didn't vanish. I was erased." The silence in the room was deafening. Derek stood, red-faced. "What the hell is this?" Valora froze, her hands gripping the podium so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Judith stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "This is now a legal matter," she announced calmly. "We've filed with the district court. Fraud, forgery, intentional misrepresentation of estate assets, and this venue was chosen because it's public. Because accountability is better witnessed." The guests, donors, partners, board members began murmuring. Some stood. One of the nonprofit directors approached Valora, voice low but firm. "This isn't just bad optics," he said. "It's liability. You need to step down, immediately." Zinnia was nowhere to be seen. I noticed her slip out the side door minutes before the recording ended. Eldon stepped beside me, his eyes steady. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." The days that followed moved quickly. News outlets picked up the story. Judith handled everything with surgical precision. Subpoenas, depositions, hearings. I sat through each one, dressed in the same quiet determination I had worn at the showcase. Weeks later, we sat in the courtroom as the judge delivered the verdict. Based on evidence presented, including testimony, recorded statements, and official documentation, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Marilee Cassandra Wells. He continued, voice even. "Valora Bennett is hereby removed from any oversight or affiliation with Brightwash Laundromats. Derek Wells is ordered to pay financial restitution and will be placed under federal audit for tax misrepresentation." There were no cheers, no dramatic gavel slams, just justice, steady and unceremonious, like truth often is. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras clicked, microphones thrust forward. Someone shouted my name. I stepped up to the microphones. My voice was clear. "I didn't win," I said. "I just stopped letting them write my story for me." Later that evening, back at Grandpa's house, I sat in the living room with a blanket around my shoulders and tea in my hands. Eldon sat across from me, watching the fire crackle. The house was quiet again. Safe. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. One new email. From Zinnia. Subject: "Can we talk?" I didn't open Zinnia's email right away. I stared at the subject line. "Can we talk?" For a full minute, then shut my laptop and walked into the kitchen. The tea kettle was already warming on the stove, a low whistle just beginning to build. I poured myself a cup, sat at the table across from Grandpa, and said nothing. He didn't ask. Later that afternoon, I finally read it. Her message was short, careful, hesitant in all the ways it never used to be. "I don't know what was real anymore, but I know I helped hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to listen. Just once." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop and began writing what I wished I could have said to her, to all of them, years ago. It started as a letter. Then it became an article. Judith helped me format it into an op-ed for the local paper. They called me unstable. They said I was ungrateful, that I left on my own. But no one asked why I was gone. No one let me speak. The piece ran 2 days later under the title, "The Family You Don't See in the Photos." The feedback came in waves. Messages from strangers, emails from former neighbors, a call from a girl in North Dakota who said, "They tried to erase me, too." I saved that voicemail. I never responded to Zinnia's email. I didn't need to. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a door you opened for someone else. Sometimes it was just a path you stopped waiting on them to walk. A week later, I drove out to the cemetery with a bundle of lilies and my mother's journal wrapped in a ribbon. The air was still cold, but the grass was fighting its way back under patches of melting snow. I found her headstone just as the sun broke through the clouds. I knelt, brushing away the debris that had gathered over the name I now carried with pride. Cassandra M. Wells. "I brought your journal," I whispered. "And lilies. I know you hated roses." I placed the journal gently on the stone, then sat down beside it, knees in the grass. "They tried," I told her. "They really tried to make me disappear, but I remembered who I was, and more importantly, I remembered who you were." For a long moment, there was only wind. But in that stillness, I felt the weight of something lift. Not the pain, that would take longer, but the silence. The part of me that had once believed I deserved to be forgotten. It was finally gone. The next morning, I stood in the small office of a nonprofit lawyer, signing the final paperwork to establish the Second Voice Fund, a scholarship for girls aged 16 to 21 who had been displaced, rejected, or left behind by the very people meant to love them. "This is going to change lives," the lawyer said, handing me the last document. I nodded. It already has. Our first applicant came a week later. 17 years old. Lived in her car for 6 months behind a gas station after her stepmother locked her out during a custody battle. She'd been trying to finish high school, working nights at a convenience store, hiding from a world that never gave her a reason to speak up. I met her at the local diner. She ordered coffee and eggs, eyes darting like she didn't quite believe this was real. After breakfast, I walked her outside and handed her a check, first month's rent for a room at a safe housing unit nearby. Then I opened my trunk, pulled out a blanket, soft, new, blue, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stared at me, eyes wide. I said, "I know what this winter feels like, but spring comes." Back in town, I stopped by the laundromat, the original one, my mother's old pride. The windows had been cleaned. The flickering sign above the door was replaced with a new one, owned and operated by M.R. Wells. I stood for a moment before stepping inside. The hum of machines filled the space, comforting in its constancy. The smell of detergent and fresh fabric softener swirled in the air. Eldon sat in the corner, a mug of coffee in one hand, a thick book in the other. He looked up and smiled. "You settling in?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. I walked behind the counter and took it in. The shelves, the receipts, the small clipboard of chores. My life. No longer borrowed, no longer hidden. People still whispered sometimes. I heard them at the grocery store. "That's the girl whose parents disowned her. That's the one who sued her own family." They weren't wrong, but now they also said things like, "She turned the whole story around. She helps girls like her. She rebuilt it." I took out the key to the office and unlocked the drawer where we kept our ledgers. It was organized, clean, mine. As I sat down to reconcile the books, I looked up at the framed photo on the wall. Mom in her apron, standing outside the laundromat on opening day, eyes bright, wind in her hair. Underneath it, a plaque, in honor of the woman who built this, and the daughter who brought it back. I placed my hand over my chest, feeling the weight of the crescent moon necklace. The cold nearly broke me. But they forgot. Frost doesn't kill everything. Some things bloom again. Some families won't apologize, not because they're right, but because they need their version of the story to survive. But you don't need their apology to write your own ending. Have you ever been erased from your own family's narrative and had to build yourself back from nothing? If Marilee's story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true-life revenge stories and quiet battles worth watching.